Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being the show where it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Hit and Run episode 5. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we have the Asif situation where, once again, the interrogation is continuing because it seems like they're kind of implying, or at least Tamir is implying like, oh, you leaked a lot of information to her. He was like, we never talked. Which is like, is that true? Because some of the stuff later on in the episode makes you go, was he covering his tracks because she leaked some information? Or, I don't know. It could be the thing of, oh, I am trying to, like, cover my ass because I didn't realize how royally I screwed up in, like, giving away some secret intelligence that I shouldn't have. Because, there's also the thing of, she might not have needed him to talk. All she had to do was, like, wait for you to be around, taking a shower, do your typical covert thing of, like, rummaging through your stuff, your files, taking pictures. She doesn't even need to take the files themselves. All she has to do is take pictures of them and send them back to, like, the CIA and stuff, so. But even him trying to deflect, like, oh, like, what about that tour guide husband of hers? Have you looked into him? And Tamir was like, oh, yeah, we know all there is to know about him, which is so interesting, because it's like, right, we know about his situation. We don't care about him right now. We care about you, because you and your royal screw-ups have led us to this situation. But it's like I said, I'm curious, like, was he just covering his bases because he's like, no, we legitimately didn't talk. But even Tamir was like, that just means she's better at her job than you are. Once again, he's like, oh, 30 years I put into this job, almost lost my life twice. And it's like, oh, and we thank you for that loyalty and what you've done for that. But it's like, what have you done for me lately? It seems like lately you kind of bungled this whole thing and basically exposed a lot of highly classified information to someone. He's like, I get it. I totally get it. Young, beautiful woman takes an interest in you. God, who wouldn't take the bait? But especially being the scoundrel that you are, so. But interestingly enough, after all this, they do ultimately let him go. And I was like, is this a fake out? Are they good? But it's like, nah, I guess it's like, we know where you are. You've satisfied us. Plus you're fired, so it doesn't matter. So any screw up, even Tamir said, it's like, oh, like, what happens to you afterwards? Not up to me. He's like, they might take in consideration your years in the job, but other than that, that's outside of my, So it's just kind of let him go, drive him back home. His wife just chewing him out as he's looking for bugs because he's trying to see if the place is bugged. And his wife is like, I'm done. Get out of my house. And it's like, yep. In one swift movement, you were taken for days. Your wife, it's not like, for him, it's like a lot of it's classified, so he can't say anything anyway, but it's also like, you've been fired, but also if you run your mouth about any more classified stuff, you're most likely going to catch a bullet because of it, so he's just trying to see, like, the fact is that they already knew all this must mean that his place must be bugged. They probably already went in there, if there were any bugs, they probably already went in there and got him out. So now he's in that paranoia state because he can't find any bugs, but doesn't mean there weren't some there already. They might just already be gone, like I'm saying, but just in one fell swoop, his entire life is falling apart. The woman you were actually in love with the entire time, legitimately were in love with, betrayed you. Once again, how much you were in the know is the biggest question. I think you were duped. I don't think you saw anything. I don't think you did speak to her about anything, but there's always the possibility, so there's all of that. And once again, the parallels of like, oh yeah, you have Sergeyev doing the exact same thing, kind of being paranoid because he now knows, like, wait, she was CIA, the CIA's involved, Wexler was Martin, then Wexler's in general were CIA. It's like, all right, I need to handle this because it also puts things in perspective now. Like conversations that seem so out of context and out of place. Now you add in the context of this was a CIA conversation happening right in front of me. Like he's like sitting down with her, and it just all of a sudden Martin walks by. Like this is some time ago, and it's like, Danny? Dad! And it's like, I wonder how far in advance did they have that set up, that whole, like, cover, or was that, like, a last-minute cover? It's just like, oh, Danny! And she's like, Dad, hey! I feel like for them to have that conversation, and had it already been set up in case Sergeyev ever asked any questions, but them actually meeting was never part of the plan. Because, like, Danny's super uncomfortable the entire time, being like, Sergeyev kind of got the vibe, but he probably just chalked it up to, oh, maybe she's not on the best of terms with her dad. But he's like, yeah, Sergeyev, you've got a daughter, right? Oh, yeah, so you know better than anyone. It's like, I'm sure she didn't appreciate that, because I think that was kind of like a sly way to bring his daughter up in the conversation, probably Danny being like, I'm not too fond of that. But he's like, yeah, family, matters. And it's like, Danny, you missed out on the last reunion. And it's like, okay, so most likely code for you didn't check in when you were supposed to come back for your last check-in, you didn't check in. Because we did find out a correction where it's like, I thought the last time she was home was like 9 months ago, because that's when the box got sent there. I mean, that's still a possibility, but it's also like, no, because the box came a week ago, but like, it seemed like the last time she was there was maybe 9 months ago, but it turns out like because of her passport, it seems like she came back like a month ago, so that might have been the last time she was in the U.S. Like, this is like well before Segev, and that particular flashback was like well before they ended up getting married. And once again, the time frame of that relationship, it's like it seemed like it's maybe like a year or less. It's kind of what it seems like that whirlwind relationship ended up being. But obviously, even like him sneaking peeks at her in a wedding dress, it's like, oh, it's super sweet, it's super cute. But then, like, now having the context, if you look at her in the mirror and just kind of like the like look across her face of like, and then she turns around and kind of smiles at Sega, but it's like that moment of just kind of like she's living a lie. It's like, right, this guy is marrying me. He doesn't, because I think she felt bad because she's like, legitimately, he's a sweet guy. Like, I'm getting close to him and his daughter. All the points I was bringing up last episode of how messed up it is that you are who you are. But at the same time, she did feel guilty about it because she was lying to them all the time and she didn't want to, because it's like, right, I found my way into your world, into your life under deceptive means, and it's like, your daughter's the sweetest thing in the world, and it's like, I actually legitimately like this life. It isn't just like a front, you know? And so maybe she was trying to leave. Maybe she was trying to get out of the big old spy game, and maybe that's, I don't know. That's the big thing, trying to figure out like what this is all about. Segev turns to he turns to Naomi for this. Side note, I kept looking the entire time. I was like, why do I feel like I recognize the actor who plays her husband, Henry? I'm like, why does he seem so familiar? It finally dawned on me where I know him from. Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, season 3. He played Pan, like the Piper, the head of the circus in season 3. Yeah, I could be mistaken, but I believe that's the same actor. And I was like, that's probably why I was like, because it kept bugging me. I know you from something. I just couldn't quite place it. I believe that's what it is. But obviously it's like, right, she's going to look into the passports and everything, because it's like, if they're like stamped and everything, that means they're legitimate government issues. So, obviously now it solidifies the whole, like, yeah, her being now like Segev, it's confirmed for Segev that she was CIA. So, and obviously this is taking its toll on Naomi's relationship, because he's like, oh, what's going on? Give me the skinny, ha ha ha. Now let's head to this fucking fundraiser, because he had overheard her say that. She's just kind of like, Segev actually is complicating more and more of her life by popping into it like this. Other than that, he ended up having to ditch his phone just in case, like I said, someone's listening. So he's basically telling Tali to kind of lay low, don't get too mixed up in this, because it's like explaining like Danny was CIA, her real name was Sophie. It's like everything about her was a lie, because Tali had kind of crossed the lines herself in her ex, now sex buddy, ended up giving her, couldn't give her any information on the dude's picture because it's too grainy, but so she ended up putting it into her boss's computer and runs it, and it's like, immediately gets a hit. It's about him being like, oh, someone that works at the American embassy, and obviously like she immediately like, oh, that's complete another BS, because even the stuff is saying that he died in Maryland instead of actually died here in Tel Aviv. It's like they're covering his death up majorly. It's like, obviously she even got caught by someone in the department, like, what you doing to the boss? Oh, he gave me, I look up something. It's like, yeah. She's like, if you want to call him to confirm it. Just telling you he's in a bad mood. So that's probably going to come back to bite her a little bit. Like, oh, what were you doing on my computer? Like, so-and-so called me about the fact what were you doing? Nothing. I was just looking up something related to it. Probably can look through a search history of like, yeah, it got flagged that you were looking up this person. Why? I told you to abandon this case. You were too close to it. But it's going to be a thing of, yeah, but there's some like weird weird stuff with this case, and then you have to beg the question, like, is he in the know? Once again, it's like, you get paranoid because I don't know who to trust under these circumstances except for, like, the lead characters, but even then, it's like, well, Danny's technically a lead character, and I don't know what you'd consider a character like. I guess it's kind of like Laura from, like, Twin Peaks, like, would she be considered a main character, considering, like, she's not, like, except for flashbacks, she's not really in the show, but the show kind of centers around her, like Danny, this entire, well, Sophie, it like, which I can't help. Anytime I'm saying Sophie, I immediately think of, like, Sophie Devereaux from Leverage, because obviously Leverage Redemption and everything, but it's just because, like, her whole thing, she's a grifter, so she has multiple identities, so, like, that, every time I say Sophie, I just want to almost say Devereaux at the end of it. Like, that show has kind of, like, broken me with that now. I mean, it's my own fault for literally binging the entire original series in preparation for watching Redemption 2, so that's definitely going to be a hard habit to kind of break in my head a little bit, but tangents aside. Now knowing, you know, the skinny on what's really going on in this vein of things, so he's asking Tally to kind of, like, unless he calls, like, kind of stay low, don't contact him. Which, getting rid of his phone kind of screws over Ron, because Ron's having fun with his son. I'm actually surprised him and his ex are on such good terms, because they're joking about, like, oh, he's like, remember what I was doing the first time? She's like, yeah, you were, like, urinating your name or something in the sun. He's like, no, inside. It's like, you were playing guitar. See, and she fell in love with me because of that. Like, he's bonding with his son. Even saying, like, oh, guitar lessons and everything, but the cops, those detectives in particular, found the bodies. They were able to take the dash cam footage from the cop car, find the car, and it's, like, licensed, it's registered to Jenny, Ron's ex, so they show up, and showed you who Jenny is. Jenny's kind of badass, because she was trying to be like, oh yeah, like, I mean, it's registered to my husband, but I mean, he lives in the city, so he could have probably let someone borrow it, and immediately Ron's back there jamming on the guitar about to sing. I'm like, she was about to cover for you. Like, sadly, she couldn't be like, oh, let me go check on my son really quickly, and was able to, Ron, get the hell out of here. Like, she would have if she could have, but Ron ended up running. I was like, oh boy, this doesn't look good. You could have maybe soiree, like, your way around this, like, be super suave and be like, oh yeah, that car, yeah, someone stole it. Did you register it? I don't know if the camera, the footage wasn't good enough that you could actually see, like, Segev or Ron in the dash cam footage, at least based on what we saw. So they didn't know it was necessarily Ron driving it, but he kind of ran. I was like, he could have probably handled that a lot better. I mean, to be fair, you're going to go down for, you know, not only hitting a police car, but also killing 2 people. So, of course, you're going to run like crazy. And the fact of the matter is, he finally gets, like, the cop, he's like, oh, don't ever make me run again or whatever. Luckily, Ron escaped. Not luckily, because he did punch the detective, and you're like, ooh, that's going to make things worse. So he can't get in contact with Segev. He does later on show up at Naomi's place, and he's talking to Henry about, like, oh yeah, like how him, Naomi, and Segev go back. Because there was even that situation, like, she talked about, like, oh, we were in a situation where we were surrounded by cops, and he tried, it's like we were in Bogota, and Ron tried to bribe them, but he only had $3 on it, and they took it, and we found our way out of that situation. So, once again, we're getting fragments of, like, what the hell what is your guys' story exactly? It's super vague. And even Ron's explaining some of the stuff with Henry. He's like, yeah, she used to be fun, but now, like, all that fun's kind of got sapped out of her. But obviously, it's like, Segev's like, what are you here? He's like, yeah, I kind of punched a cop. What? He's like, what the? Are you out of your fucking mind? It's like, what do you want me to do? They were going to arrest me. So we need to get out of town now. And so they kind of leave, and Naomi and Henry are like, Henry's like, what was that about? She's like, I don't know. Can you speak Hebrew? Because if not, I can't either. So I'm literally just as much in the dark. But prior to that, Naomi had met up with Segev to look over some of this stuff about Danny or Sophie. So, obviously, it turns out she was looking at a paper that was basically talking about Israeli intelligence and the CIA. Because even, like, for Naomi, she couldn't really fit, like, what was the purpose of this, because Israel, I kept saying that weird, Israel and the CIA, or the U.S. in general, are supposed to be allies, but then it turns out, like, there's an article that, like, Danny was reading that's kind of saying, like, no, like things have kind of gone wrong, and they go and visit this reporter like Bill, but it turns out Bill pulled the story because his source Shaw like ended up backing out, and it's like, why? And Bill's like, dude, I don't know, I got a call from someone basically threatening me. Like, the fact of the matter is I abandoned the story, and the fact of the matter is I got the message, can you guys get mine? So the big thing now is like, right, we're going to have to find Wexler. That becomes the final denominator with this, because Tali ends up talking to the dude who, Shaw, who was talking to, he's like, yeah, I kind of ran my mouth off. And he's like, yeah, I went back. It's like, oh, did someone talk to you? He's like, no, I made my own decision. She's like, that's not what I asked. And he's like, okay, like, some guy threatened him. And it turns out the guy that threatened him was Asif. So it's like, okay. So, once again, is this a thing of he had some idea about he found out on his own that Danny was CIA, and by the time it was too late, so he's tried to, like, remedy that situation by, like, nipping this in the bud, because maybe it wasn't just that dude Shaw that was, like, running his mouth. Maybe Asif was. That's why I'm kind of feel like that's the stuff that makes me feel like he probably was running his mouth to Danny. I don't know. We will never fully know the truth because Asif's not going to tell. But Tali is connected the dots, be like, hey, I want to talk to you. And it's like, she's still unaware that he's the dude that was having an affair with Danny. She's unaware at that point. But now it's like, right, that Danny stuff is coming back to him. So it's like, did he have something to do with that? Because the current thought is that, you know, Naomi and Segev have is that the CIA killed her because maybe, but it's like, yeah, but then why send a CIA operative to kill me? And Naomi's like, maybe they were afraid that that Sophie ended up telling you stuff she shouldn't have. Who knows? So Naomi ends up calling one of her CIA sources to be like, hey, I want to talk to the CIA about a Martin Wexler and whether or not he had another CIA operative, Danielle, killed in Tel Aviv. Get back to me. But obviously, like, Ron showing up kind of interrupted things. So, but then while talking to his daughter, it turns out that it's like, wait, what do you mean your grandpa's there? Martin's there in Tel Aviv. He's actually arriving. He wants to go out and say, oh boy, you steered the hornet's nest. He was probably already on his way to Tel Aviv, or maybe he made sure, like, no, I'm going to head there now. Like, because I guess Segev being in, like, New York anyway, like, spooked him, I think, enough for them to already be having this planned out. I don't know. Maybe it's just in general, like, his name being whispered and associated. All right, we got to clean house. There's too many loose ends in this regard. I was about to say, I was like, I don't think they'd kill Bella. They definitely would remove Segev from the board. In what manner? Well, we kind of get a glimpse of that later on, because it's like, right, he's in Tel Aviv, so Ron's like, go ahead. But also, Ron's in a position where he's like, I got to get out of town because the cops are already looking for me. Hell, the cops already went to go see Isaac, but Isaac's kind of like, no, I'm not going to say anything. Just because it's like, right, exposing them is potentially going to expose all the shady stuff he's associated with, so maybe that's his justification. Like, nah, if I drag them down, I'm going to get dragged down with them because a lot of their history is tied to some nefarious stuff that I was a part of too, so, well, actually led the charge on, so maybe that's why he's not saying anything. Not like he cares about those dudes. Or it could just be like, oh, I don't want them in trouble. I'm going to kill them myself, so I don't want the cops involved because that way it's going to make it easier when I track them down and murder them myself. My thought, potentially, but either way, you have the situation playing out the way it is, and Segev is on his way to the airport. It's like, oh, the moment the dude that's like, oh, can you wait a minute? I'm like, okay, this isn't good. And it's like, well, Segev hasn't been tied to any of the stuff that's going down, so it's not like that's why. So it's like most likely the CIA is like, oh, you asking questions? All right, once again, we'll remove you from the board by putting you on. We have no idea what they actually said about Segev, but it's enough to like get like TSA and stuff like that after him. So luckily he escapes on the train, but man, this situation goes from like worse to worse, because you're like, once again, how do you like erase all of this? Because it's some government level like conspiracy stuff going down. Like, once again, I don't see you bouncing back from being in jail to be like, oh yeah, everything's fine, I'm gonna go back to Tel Aviv. I don't know whether there's gonna be a thing of like try to whether he gets like extradited back home to face issues, because maybe like the intelligence agency in Tel Aviv, it's like, oh, we're going to do this so that we can get him, so we can kill him, so maybe that's your way around it. Just kind of like, yeah, a lot of that stuff in the U.S. kind of gets swept under the rug, just because he just kind of gets, I mean, there's always like the CIA situation of him getting sent to like a freaking, God, what's the term for it? It's basically the pits they drop you in, like a, was it a black spot? I forgot what those are called, like where they kind of like lock people away and they disappear. I forgot what those are called now, but unless that ends up being his circumstance, I don't know. I'm very, very interested to ultimately see how all this ends up playing out going forward to the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.